I never imagined I'd end up at this crossroads, torn between my husband and the legacy my uncle entrusted to me. When Nate demanded that I sign over my inheritance, he had no idea I had already been planning my next steps for the company. But that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of years of small compromises that, over time, chipped away at me until I couldn't take it anymore. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. I had always thought of myself as a woman with control over my own life, my career, and my marriage. That illusion shattered the moment I stepped into the legacy left to me by Uncle Charlie. I had spent the last decade living in the shadows of my husband Nate's ambitions and expectations, slowly losing the essence of who I was. But everything began to change when I inherited Westridge, the company Charlie had built and nurtured with his own hands. It was his final gift to me, and it was time for me to start living by my own choices. 4 years, Nate and I had lived under an unspoken agreement. He made the decisions, and I followed. Our marriage had been one of quiet submission, my role primarily to support his vision of success, even if it meant sacrificing my own. But with the passing of Uncle Charlie, something inside me snapped. I couldn't ignore the pull of Westridge anymore, especially when it became clear that Nate saw it only as a financial asset to be leveraged, not a legacy to be honored. I stood at the crossroads of my marriage and my future, knowing I had to choose. The inheritance was more than just an opportunity. It was a challenge to the narrative that had been written for me. I wasn't just inheriting a company. I was inheriting my own voice, my right to define what success looked like for me. I wanted more than the life Nate and I had built in Seattle, more than the hollow comfort of a luxury condo that represented everything I had compromised. I needed to reclaim my independence. The confrontation with Nate was inevitable. We had always skirted the edges of disagreement, but now, as I faced him in that sterile meeting room at the Boise airport, everything shifted. His approach was the same as always. A tight smile, the calm demeanor of a man who thought he could manipulate any situation with his charm and logic. But this time, I didn't back down. "You've always expected me to fall in line," I told him, voice steady but firm. "Not this time. Westridge is mine to run." Nate's disbelief was palpable. He didn't know how to handle my refusal, and that was exactly the point. For the first time in our marriage, I had said no. Not just to him, but to the path I had been walking for far too long. As the days passed, I settled into the role of a business owner, something I never thought I'd be. I began to see Westridge not just as a company, but as a reflection of my uncle's vision, one that was entirely separate from the control and influence Nate wanted to impose on me. It wasn't just about business, it was about dignity, self-respect, and taking charge of my own destiny. But Nate wouldn't give up that easily. His charm offensive was relentless. He tried to twist my decision into something emotionally driven, something irrational. "You're making a mistake, Vanessa," he said during one of our many tense conversations. "This is about what's best for us, for our future." No, I thought. This isn't about us. This is about me. And I will not let you erase me any longer. But the challenges were far from over. As I dug deeper into the operations of Westridge, I found myself at odds not only with Nate, but also with the expectations of my own family. My mother, ever the dutiful wife, couldn't understand why I would risk everything for the company when we had a life in Seattle that others would envy. And Nate's mother, Eleanor, seemed to share the same perspective. This was just a phase, something emotional, and the smart choice was always to defer to Nate. But Uncle Charlie's belief in me echoed louder than their doubts. I wasn't just inheriting a business, I was inheriting a purpose, one that was uniquely mine to fulfill. In the midst of all this, I found a surprising ally in Zoe, my closest friend, and the one person who never saw me as anything other than capable, independent, and worthy of my own dreams. She became my rock as I navigated the storm that Nate was trying to create. The tension escalated with every passing day. Nate was relentless, trying to make me second-guess myself at every turn. He used our shared financial interests as leverage, accusing me of making hasty decisions, of letting grief cloud my judgment. But the more he pushed, the stronger I became. I had a plan for Westridge. I had a vision that was grounded in real business strategy and a deep respect for what my uncle had built. And as I prepared to fight for Westridge, I realized something fundamental. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about my own life. Would I continue to live in the shadows of someone else's vision, or would I step into the light and define my own future? The weeks after Nate's arrival in Boise felt like a whirlwind. Every conversation with him was a battle, but each time, I felt myself growing stronger. It was as if stepping into Uncle Charlie's shoes at Westridge had awakened something in me, something I had forgotten existed. The old me, the woman who once had dreams and convictions of her own, was slowly coming back to life. Nate, however, was relentless. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't just agree to sell Westridge or integrate it into Morgan Financial, a move that would benefit both of us. His pitch was the same every time. This is for our future, Vanessa. We're building something bigger. This small company is holding us back. But what he didn't understand was that it wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about my right to choose my own path, and about something I hadn't realized I needed: my independence. I had always let him call the shots, letting his version of success shape my world. And it was comfortable, in a way. Comfortable in the same way being in a cage can be comfortable. Familiar, predictable, but ultimately stifling. The more he pushed, the more I realized how much I had to lose if I didn't stand firm now. If I gave in, I wouldn't just be giving up Westridge. I would be giving up the chance to reclaim myself, to stop being the supporting character in Nate's narrative. This was my chance to finally step into the lead role of my own life. But standing firm wasn't easy. Every time I said no to Nate, it felt like I was going against years of conditioning. The woman who had always kept the peace, who had put Nate's career and ambitions before her own, was now saying no, not just to him, but to the life I had built with him. It was terrifying. What if he didn't understand? What if he couldn't accept this new version of me? What if he walked away? The first confrontation that left me shaken happened the night he tried to manipulate me by threatening our financial future. "You're throwing away opportunities," he said, his voice cold with disbelief. "We could be expanding, Vanessa. Think of all we've built, the house in Aspen, the club memberships. You're risking it all." But for the first time in our marriage, I didn't flinch. "You've always valued those things more than what truly matters." "I can live without them," I replied, my voice steady. "I can live without you too, if that's what it takes to keep Westridge." The look in Nate's eyes at that moment, a mixture of shock and fury, almost made me second-guess myself. But I didn't. The next day, I drove to Westridge alone. The cabin in the woods had always been my sanctuary, my place of peace. Here, I didn't have to wear the mask of a dutiful wife or the polished corporate executive. I could be me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the strength of that. I reviewed the marketing strategy one had developed, one that would take Westridge to the next level without compromising its integrity. It was clear to me now, this was where I was meant to be, not in some glossy boardroom in Seattle or part of Nate's ambitious schemes. The hours passed quickly, and before long, it was time to meet Nate at the airport. I didn't want to give him any extra time to sway me. I knew he'd come with his usual charm, trying to convince me that his way was the only logical path. I was prepared, though. I had made my decision. When he arrived, impeccably dressed as always, I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. He looked at me with that familiar concern, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Vanessa, what's going on?" he asked, his voice tight with frustration. "I've been trying to reach you for days." I stayed calm. "I've been busy," I said flatly. "Let's talk in the car." The drive back to the cabin was filled with his forced pleasantries, a thinly veiled attempt at controlling the conversation. He couldn't understand why I wouldn't just let him take over. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, recalculating his approach, trying to figure out how to get me to bend to his will. But when I told him I wouldn't sell Westridge or transfer control, his reaction was one of disbelief. "You have no experience running a company," he said, as though my marketing background and business acumen didn't matter. What about our future? This isn't just a business decision. This is about what's best for us. No, I said, the words feeling like a weight lifted from my chest. This is my decision. Westridge is mine, not ours. He laughed, incredulously. You can't be serious. We're married. Your assets are my assets. I felt the anger flare inside me, but I tamped it down. Not this time, Nate, I said. I'm doing this on my own. The silence in the car was thick and heavy, his disbelief palpable. But I didn't regret my words. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it again. At the cabin, Nate didn't hide his distaste for the modest space. He walked through the living room with the same dismissive attitude he had shown every time he stepped into my world. It was as though nothing I did, nothing I had achieved on my own, mattered. So, this is where you've been hiding out, he sneered. Playing mountain woman while ignoring your responsibilities back home? I bristled but didn't rise to the bait. I haven't been hiding, I said calmly, hanging my jacket by the door. I've been learning about the company I've inherited, making informed decisions about its future. He threw his hands up in exasperation. And what decisions have you made? His voice was laced with mockery. I met his gaze directly. I'm not selling Westridge, I said, my voice unshakable. I'm going to run it myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nate stared at me like I had suddenly spoken a language he didn't understand. Finally, he spoke, his voice dripping with incredulity. That's absurd. You have no experience running a manufacturing company. You've spent years in marketing, not management. I have the skills, I countered. I've worked in business development and brand positioning. The operational side is already being handled by a capable team. I don't need to take over every aspect. I just need to honor Uncle Charlie's legacy. He shook his head. This isn't business, Vanessa. This is sentimentality. No, I said firmly. It's business. I've developed a strategy that will take Westridge to the next level. I'm not letting it go. It's not about emotion, it's about rational decisions. His frustration was clear, but I didn't back down. Later that evening, the tension between us was unbearable. He tried to regain control, using charm and threats, but I refused to be manipulated anymore. This was my moment, the moment where I could either reclaim my life or lose it forever. I decided to sleep on it, knowing that the coming days would be filled with challenges, but I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I was ready to fight for myself, not just for a business but for my voice, my independence, and my future. The days following my confrontation with Nate felt like a blur. The tension between us was palpable, but something inside me had shifted. Every time he tried to corner me or pressure me into submission, I grew more resolute. I couldn't go back to the life I had lived with him, a life where my voice was rarely heard, and my needs were always secondary to his ambitions. Nate, however, wasn't going to let go without a fight. The games were just beginning. The first sign that things were escalating came when I received a call from Martin, the COO at Westridge. His voice was laced with concern. Vanessa, there's something you need to know. Your husband's been reaching out to some of our clients. I'm worried he's trying to create doubt about the direction you're taking with the company. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had anticipated that Nate would be angry, but this was something else. He was actively trying to undermine me, sowing seeds of doubt where there had once been trust. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. We've worked with most of these clients for years, Martin continued. They trust us. But we need to act fast. I'll reach out to the key accounts tomorrow to reassure them, but you should be aware of what's happening. Thank you, Martin, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mind was racing, but I couldn't afford to panic. I had to stay one step ahead of him. After hanging up, I immediately called Zoe. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm but sharp. What's up? Nate's been contacting Westridge clients, trying to undermine the company. I said, not bothering to soften the words. He's trying to create instability. Zoe was silent for a beat, then her tone hardened. That's low, even for him. Yeah. And it's not the first time. He's been using Tim Crawford to try to manipulate my position at the firm, too. It's like he's trying to turn everything I've built into a bargaining chip. Not if I have anything to say about it, Zoe snapped. I've got your back, Nessa. I'll help you handle this. Just don't let him get to you. I smiled grimly. I won't. But we need to come up with a counter-strategy, and fast. The next day, I took a step I hadn't anticipated. I called Mr. Daniels, my attorney, and instructed him to formalize my intentions regarding Westridge's future. The company was mine, and I wasn't backing down. I also asked him to explore what legal options I had in the event Nate tried to take matters to court. This wasn't just about holding on to a business. This was about reclaiming my life. As the days wore on, it became clear that Nate was getting more desperate. He began threatening my career directly. One morning, I found a message from him waiting on my phone. I've been speaking with Tim Crawford. If you continue down this path, there could be consequences for your position at Crawford and Barnes. This isn't just about the company anymore. It's about your future. The veiled threat in that message sent a chill down my spine. But instead of retreating, something inside me hardened. For so long, I had let him dictate the terms of my career, my marriage, my life. That had to stop. That evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at the woman who was looking back at me. A woman who had been told she couldn't succeed on her own, that her worth was tied to someone else's success. A woman who had learned to shrink herself, to fit into the mold Nate had created for her. But that woman was gone. And in her place was someone who had reclaimed her voice, her confidence, and her independence. I sent Nate a text back, my fingers steady as I typed. If you try to interfere with my career or manipulate the situation further, I will make sure it's known. I will not be intimidated or controlled. The business decisions I make are mine, and I will not back down. This is my inheritance, and I will fight for it. The phone buzzed immediately, his reply coming with the usual sharpness. You're making a mistake, Vanessa. This is your final warning. His words felt empty to me now. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The following week, I flew back to Seattle, ready to face Nate. When I arrived at our condo, it was as though the weight of the situation was closing in on me. The space that had once felt like home now felt cold and alien. The furniture, the decor, everything about it felt like it had been tailored to him. I couldn't ignore the way he had rearranged my things when I was away. My clothes, my books, even my personal items had been shifted to the margins of our shared life. As I unpacked my suitcase, I noticed the coffee cup left on the counter, his clothes scattered around the bathroom, and files still open on the dining table. He was trying to maintain control, trying to remind me that I was still under his watch. But I wasn't the same person anymore. That evening, when Nate finally came home, he greeted me with his usual cool politeness, but there was an undercurrent of tension. "You're back early," he remarked, his eyes scanning me as if trying to assess what I was thinking. "I have some things to sort out," I said flatly, my tone making it clear that I wasn't here to appease him. "I need to speak with you." He sat down, the silence between us heavy with expectation. It was the moment of reckoning. Nate had never liked when I challenged him. He had always assumed that, in the end, I would capitulate, like I had always done before. But not this time. "I've made my decision," I began, my voice steady. "I'm keeping Westridge. I'm going to run it, and I'm not selling it or merging it with Morgan Financial. You don't get to dictate the terms of my inheritance anymore." Nate's expression hardened, and his lips curled into a thin smile. "You really think you can do this on your own? You've never run anything before. You're not capable of handling it." "I'm more than capable," I countered. "I've built my career from the ground up. I'm a marketing expert, and I know how to position a brand. The team at Westridge is solid. We'll succeed without you." You're making a huge mistake, he warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You'll regret this. I'm already past regret, Nate, I said quietly, my resolve stronger than ever. You've tried to control me for too long, and I've let you. But not anymore. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then an icy coldness. If you choose this path, don't expect me to wait around. I'll do whatever it takes to protect our interests. And you know how ruthless I can be. I met his gaze, unwavering. I don't need you to protect me. I'm more than capable of handling this myself. Nate stood up sharply, his chair scraping against the floor. We'll see how long that confidence lasts, Vanessa, he spat before storming out. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything that had happened settled over me. I knew Nate wouldn't give up easily. This was only the beginning. But I had made my decision, and there was no going back now. The next few weeks passed in a blur of action and strategy. I worked tirelessly on refining Westridge's marketing plan, meeting with the team, and building relationships with clients. Every day felt like a battle, but I was finally playing on my own terms. And then, Nate made his next move. The next few weeks at Westridge felt like a whirlwind. I was fully immersed in the business, balancing the marketing strategy with the day-to-day operations of a company I had once only known from the outside. Every moment, every decision was a test of my newfound independence. The fear of making mistakes was always there, but so was the fire that Uncle Charlie had instilled in me, the belief that I could lead, that I had the vision to grow Westridge into something remarkable. But that sense of purpose wasn't enough to keep me from the looming pressure of Nate's next move. The threats had escalated, subtle at first, but growing increasingly more pointed. He had reached out to some of Westridge's minor shareholders, trying to get them to sell their shares to Morgan Financial, making offers that were almost too generous to refuse. He was trying to buy his way in. Martin, my COO, was the first to notice. Vanessa, you need to be aware, he said one afternoon after a particularly stressful meeting. Nate's been talking to several of the minority stakeholders. He's offering them a substantial premium for their shares. If this keeps up, it could jeopardize everything. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process the gravity of his words. He's trying to undermine me from the inside. That's what it looks like, Martin agreed, his voice tense. He's playing the long game. The realization was a sharp one. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about power, control, and a battle for the future of Westridge. Nate was determined to get what he wanted, no matter the cost. I'm not going to let him win, I said, the words coming out with a force I hadn't expected. Martin gave me a concerned look. What do you plan to do? I'm going to buy the shares myself, I replied, my mind already racing. I'll secure the minority shares before he can get his hands on them. Martin looked uncertain. That's a significant financial commitment, Vanessa. It might stretch your resources pretty thin. I've already made some calls, I said, confidence in my voice despite the trepidation that gripped me. I've got a few options lined up. If I can secure those shares, Morgan Financial won't have a foothold in Westridge. We'll stay independent. It was a gamble, but it was the only way I could protect what I had worked so hard to build. My mind flashed to the conversations with my attorney, the financial plans I had put together, the risk I was willing to take. I couldn't let Nate win. Not now. Not after everything. That evening, as I reviewed the financial documents on my laptop, my phone buzzed. A message from Zoe. Zoe, how are you holding up? I sighed and typed back quickly. Vanessa, Nate's trying to buy out the minority shareholders. He's being slick about it, but I'm not backing down. Zoe, you're stronger than he knows. What are you going to do? Vanessa, I'm going to buy those shares. I'll secure our future, no matter what it takes. Zoe, damn straight. Let me know if you need help. Her words gave me the boost I needed, even if they couldn't quite quell the growing anxiety in my chest. I wasn't alone in this. I had allies. And most importantly, I had Uncle Charlie's faith to rely on. The next morning, I made the call. I reached out to Cascade Venture Partners, explaining the urgency of the situation and securing the capital I needed to buy the shares from the minority stakeholders. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But within days, I had secured the necessary financing. It was going to be a strain on my finances, but I had to do it. As the deals came through, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was in control of this situation. I was taking action. But Nate wasn't finished with his attacks yet. He began to escalate things further, using his connections at Morgan Financial to try to put pressure on me from every angle. He even attempted to force my hand at Crawford and Barnes, making indirect threats about my job there. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was from Tim Crawford. His voice was grim as he spoke. "Vanessa, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Nate's been speaking to some of the higher-ups here, trying to insinuate that your involvement with Westridge could be a conflict of interest. He's even floated the idea that you might need to choose between your career here and your role at Westridge." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was Nate's standard operating procedure. Manipulation through the people around me, using my work, my reputation, my future, as a pawn in his game. It was becoming clear that he wasn't just trying to take over Westridge. He was trying to control every aspect of my life. "I won't be forced into making that choice, Tim," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up inside me. "I've already made my decision. I'll continue my work at Crawford and Barnes, but Westridge is mine. I'm keeping it independent." Tim was quiet for a moment. "I understand," he said at last, his tone shifting. "And we'll support you, Vanessa. This is your decision, and I know you'll make it work. If anything changes on our end, I'll let you know." I hung up the phone, the weight of the moment pressing on me. I had made a bold move, but now the consequences were coming at me from every direction. Nate wasn't just threatening my business. He was threatening my career, my reputation, everything I had worked so hard for. I could feel the walls closing in. But something had changed inside me. I wasn't going to retreat. I wasn't going to back down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to lose it all. I had already lost so much of myself to Nate's control. Now I was fighting to find out who I really was, without him. Later that evening, Nate called. The familiar coldness in his voice was unmistakable. "You've really gone too far, Vanessa," he said. "You're playing a dangerous game. If you want to lose everything, keep going down this path." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "If you think I'm going to bow down to you again, you're mistaken. This is my inheritance, my company, and my future. You don't get to decide any of that." There was silence on the other end, and then a harsh laugh. "You'll regret this. You always do." "I'm not you, Nate," I said, the words ringing with finality. "I don't regret standing up for myself." He hung up, but I wasn't shaken. I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of peace. I was fighting for what I deserved. I was fighting for the future that I could shape on my own terms. And no matter what Nate did next, I was ready. The following days were a blur of meetings, legal documents, and tense phone calls. The stakes were higher than ever. I had secured the minority shares, but Nate was far from giving up. Every move I made felt like it was being countered, and with each passing moment, the pressure mounted. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. And Nate's tactics were becoming more underhanded with each passing day. He didn't want Westridge. He wanted me to give up, to give in. But I had learned something invaluable over the past few weeks. I didn't have to yield. I didn't have to shrink myself to keep the peace. The power of my own voice, my decisions, was stronger than any manipulation he could wield. That didn't stop him from trying. One afternoon, I returned to my office at Crawford and Barnes, my head full of strategic thoughts for Westridge, when I found a message waiting on my desk. Nate's lawyer had sent a formal notice requesting a meeting to discuss an important matter. I didn't need to read it twice to know exactly what was coming. The divorce papers would be filed next. But this wasn't going to be like the other times when Nate's threats had made me fold. I wasn't afraid anymore. I dialed Zoe's number. "Nate's pushing for the divorce," I said, trying to keep the frustration from seeping into my voice. "It's only a matter of time before he uses it as leverage." "Are you going to let him do that?" Zoe asked, her voice sharp with concern but steady. "No," I replied firmly. "This time, I'm doing things differently." We spent the next hour strategizing. I had made my peace with the possibility of walking away from my marriage. But what I wouldn't do was lose everything. My independence, my self-worth, my future, just because Nate had decided to escalate. He couldn't control me anymore. That evening, I sat at my desk, reviewing the latest financial reports for Westridge when the text from Nate came through. The message was short and to the point. "Nate, we need to talk about the future of our marriage. I'm coming over in an hour." I stared at the screen for a long moment, my thoughts racing. I could feel the familiar tension bubbling up in my chest. But this time, I wouldn't cave. I would meet him on my terms. No more dancing around the issue. No more pretending. I stood up from my desk, straightened my blouse, and grabbed the folder containing all my notes on Westridge's strategy. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about my life. It was about everything I had worked to build and protect. An hour later, Nate walked into my office, as impeccably dressed as always, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his anger. The minute he stepped inside, the air shifted. The tension was palpable, but it was no longer one-sided. I was ready for this. "Vanessa," Nate said, his tone clipped. "We need to come to a decision about this. I've been patient, but I'm not going to stand by and watch you destroy everything we've built." "Everything you've built," I corrected, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm taking control of what's mine." He moved closer to my desk, his eyes narrowing. "You don't understand what you're doing. You can't run Westridge. You don't have the experience. You don't have the resources." "I don't need your permission anymore, Nate," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "Westridge is my legacy, not yours. And it's not just about the company. It's about me. I've been letting you call the shots for far too long, but not anymore. I'm choosing to stand on my own 2 feet." His gaze flickered with something close to frustration. He was used to getting his way. The realization that I wasn't bending to him was clearly a shock. "This is a foolish mistake, Vanessa," he said. "You're making decisions out of spite, not logic. You're throwing away everything we've worked for." I shook my head. "No, Nate. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm building something new. Something that's mine." Nate took a deep breath, his anger flashing across his face before he masked it. He took a step back, as if trying to gain control of the situation. "You're not going to win this," he said, his voice quiet but full of warning. "I will fight you every step of the way." "You already are," I replied, standing up and walking around the desk to face him directly. "And I'm not backing down. You want to fight? Fine. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not of you, not of losing, and not of the unknown." His face remained unreadable, but his eyes betrayed him, a mix of disbelief and recognition that things had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low. "No," I said firmly. "I won't. This is the first decision I've made in years that's truly mine. And I'll live with it, whatever the consequences." He didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, we just stood there, both understanding the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a turning point for both of us. For me, it was the final release of the old pattern of accommodation, of silencing myself to keep the peace. For Nate, it was the realization that his grip was slipping. Finally, he turned toward the door, the weight of the confrontation hanging between us. "We'll see how this plays out," he said, his voice colder than before. I didn't respond. He was right. We would see how it played out. But one thing was clear. This was the last time he would hold any real power over me. As he walked out of the office, I sat back down at my desk, my hands trembling slightly with the rush of adrenaline. But beneath the anxiety, there was something new, a sense of peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I had made the right choice, no matter what came next. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I was ready for it.